This is going to be a short video on the Muslim conquest of Iberia, which occurred in 711. The Umayyad dynasty, or caliphate, we call it a caliphate, made its way from the Middle East through the Mediterranean and northern Africa, conquering as they went along the way. And in 711, they made their way to the Iberian Peninsula. Using the help of African mercenaries, the Berbers, they were able to conquer basically all of southern Iberia up to the mid portion very quickly and without really any real resistance. There's a lot of reasons for this. One of them is no one was really expecting these people just to come up from Africa and invade all of a sudden. Also, there was a lot of splintered kingdoms in Iberia and all over Europe for that matter. There wasn't a unified fighting force. No one had a standing army at the southernmost tip of the peninsula. So two main leaders basically performed the conquest all by themselves without really any reinforcements after that. Tariq Ibn Ziyad and Musa ibn Nurasar. I'm again pronouncing those wrong, but it is said that Tariq attacked first without any permission from Musa, who is technically his superior, and conquered Gibraltar and went to Toledo, and there was actually no one in Toledo, which is kind of funny. They just left the city undefended because they heard there was invaders coming. That's not entirely historically proven, but that is one of the main major stories. Other ones say that Musa invaded first, but either way, it really doesn't matter. The Strait of Gibraltar is actually named after him. The point where he landed is Gibraltar. So I'm not going to go super into depth about the actual invasion because I want to talk about Abd Al Rahman. There are a lot of revisionist history ideas about this that kind of started in the 20th century that said they didn't really invade, and that it was just missionaries that showed up there, and it was actually 100 years after. These are basically like a nationalist attempt to try and create a unified Spain. The main proponent of this, Ignatius Oglar, again, cannot pronounce his name, grew up during the Franco regime, and I'm sure his ideas were influenced by the nationalist identity that he grew up with. But this is all but proven to be completely false. There's primary sources, the Mos-Arabic Chronicles of 754, and there's even artifacts as early as 713, gold coins. So this is just not true. There was an invasion, and they ruled for 700 years. Now, you would probably assume that the Christians did not get along with the Muslims at all, and they would resist any attempt at conversion or allying with them. That's not true. Many leaders converted to Islam, whether that was for personal gain or political gain, or simply because they actually believed in the superiority of their religion. Politicians do that today. They pretend to be religious to gain political favor, even if they don't really practice the religion. These Gothic lords that would convert were called muwallids. So basically, the Muslims back then and a lot today don't actually hate Christians and Jewish people. It's a misconception based on fear-mongering, really. They considered them people of the book. Islam and Christianity and Judaism all believe in the same God, and they all come from the same culture, the same area even. So basically all they did was tax Christians. They let them live in peace and practice peacefully, as well as Jews. Jewish communities tended to be more separate, and down the line in history, there was less, I guess you could say, like toleration for other religions, but it really just it was based on the situation and the person really ruling. It wasn't 100%, oh, we don't like Christians, we don't like Muslims, we don't like Jewish people. It's a lot more complicated than just simply their religion. Christians would study Arabic, they would learn Arabic and read poetry and write poetry in Arabic. Um, at a certain point, more Christians spoke Arabic than Latin. Latin was really not hugely used by the common people anymore. It was mainly just the church that used it. It's one of the reasons people don't speak it today. People still speak Arabic, even if it's probably a lot different from back then. When the Umayyad Caliphate collapsed in 750 in Damascus, there was a proclamation of the Abbasid Caliphate. They were Shia instead of Sunni, and they moved the capital to Baghdad. The leader of the new caliphate in Iberia was part of this Umayyad state, and he decided to try and escape because they were murdering all the old leaders, and he went to Iberia and established himself there. This was Abd Al Rahman the first, person who made the first, not the first, the Great Mosque of Cordoba. It began construction in 785. He was able to escape because he took refuge with the Berbers in North Africa. He gave them fair distribution of land after he took over. He was able to take refuge with them really because he had a Berber mother and he knew people in North Africa. This kind of shows that not everyone had a strict lineage with their religion, or their ethnicity was always just Muslim or Christian or European or Arabic or anything like that. Leaders could really have like a Christian mother, or they could have a Muslim father. Now, Christians were not supposed to marry Muslim women in Al-Andalus, but Muslim men could marry Christian women. They often had more than one wife, so they often ended up marrying Christian women. The rise of the Cordoban Caliphate was paralleled with the Christian North and the five main kingdoms there: Asturias, the Kingdom of Leon, County of Castile, County of Barcelona, the Kingdom of Aragon, the Kingdom of Pamplona / Navarra, the Kingdom of Asturia. These five kingdoms would trade with the Muslim South. Sometimes they would even send mercenaries and support them in wars against other Christian kingdoms. It wasn't as black and white as Christian versus Muslim until later on, when basically they kicked the Muslims out 700 years later. It was a very complicated relationship that cultural ideals would change, art would influence each other, people would convert to Christianity from Islam and Islam to Christianity, and the whole culture was influenced by these Muslims coming there. You can see this in the Great Mosque of Cordoba. Many Christians eventually would mimic different designs for mosques and the architectural style of the arches and the great red and white designs of these mosques. You can kind of debate whether or not that both of them just kind of borrowed from the Roman and the Visigoths. The Visigoths for sure took from the Romans. History is not really just a straight line of cultures that completely are separated from one another. There's no strict countries in that sense. Even today, the nation state is really just conglomeration of different cultures and ideas. We don't really see it because we're not alive long enough to see that. The Great Mosque was eventually added onto by Abd Al Rahman III, and eventually, once the Christians took Cordoba back, there was a cathedral put in the Great Mosque. In the middle of it, they just built a cathedral and kicked the Muslims out. Originally, the Great Mosque was thought to have a Christian church that was shared by both Christians and Muslims. Eventually, Abd Al Rahman bought the Christian half from the Christians and converted it into the Great Mosque. When the Muslims took over, there was actually a rule stating that they couldn't build new churches or even fix up their old churches. Abd Al Rahman allowed the Christians to refix their churches, and he built this great mosque, which even today is an amazing sight, revered by both religions. There's a bit of a dispute over whether or not it should be allowed like dual worship. Right now it is in the possession of the Catholic Church. And it is called the Cathedral of Our Lady of Assumption. After the original construction, Abd Al Rahman II added on to it, as well as Al Hakim II, enlarged the building significantly. He did this without having the same kind of structural integrity or design integrity. You can actually see that a lot of the pillars aren't the same on the newer sections, and in the original sections every pillar is exactly the same. Everything is more unified in the design. Cordoba was eventually conquered by King Ferdinand, and he ordered it to be converted to a Catholic church. Alfonso X oversaw this. Basically, they did add a giant cathedral in the middle of the mosque, and this was given permission by Charles V. But when actually he saw it, he said, "You destroyed it. You made it ugly." You know, he didn't actually like it because it is pretty jarring to see the design just completely changed, and it looks really weird from a bird's eye view because there's just this big building inside another building that doesn't fit the design aesthetic at all. This little story kind of shows how much respect the Christians had for the art of Islamic Spain. Islamic art found its way into manuscripts, into everyday items. There's these things called praxis that basically were just little perfume boxes, and they were nothing to the Islamic world. They were just everyday items, but they were so well made that Christians actually would buy them and either place ashes in them or use them as reliquaries for saints, which is like the most sacred of items. This really kind of shows that cultures don't necessarily draw a line on like between religions. It's just people are humans and they want to have nice things, they want to see nice things, and they want to generally get along. When they don't get along, it's more for political gain and monetary gain than anything else. It's really, people are influenced by people that want to have power over other people. I think the important thing to remember when you go over like a unique period like the conquest of medieval Spain is that culture is really an evolution of ever-changing ideas. It doesn't stay strictly to one ideology, and I think that's important to remember today when there's so much Islamophobia and hate for certain religions, and even atheists today hate Christians, hate Jews, and some Jewish people hate Christians and Muslims, and some Buddhists hate Christians and Muslims. Really, it's you can just look at history and see that it wasn't always like this, and hopefully I know it will change eventually and people will start to take cultural ideas and take people seriously again.